Hey everybody, welcome to the Marquez Says Show. I'm your host, Marquez Mosher, and this is my co-host, cohort, and eldest son, Austin Mosher. He and I always seem to bring out the feisty side of each other, and it leads to some very spirited conversations. There's never really any one topic. We see the world from many different perspectives, and sometimes we agree, and sometimes we don't. Either way, it gets very interesting, so sit back, relax, and have a bit of fun at our expense as we explore some of the most unexpected perspectives you'll ever hear about the world we live in. So, let's get started. Hey everybody, welcome to the Marquez Says Show. I'm Marquez. This is your co-host and cohort,
Austin Mosher.
Welcome everybody. Today we have a guest, Michael Putnam. He is the Regional Director of Expansion and Sales for United Home Group. He also has a nickname, Putty, which we'll probably ask him at some point. But Michael's a father of twin boys, Jack and Max, and a husband to his greatest supporter and partner, Jamie. Everything he does is to provide an example for his sons and build a life full of growth, experiences, and impact. He has had his share of challenges, most of which were self-induced, and believes that while they were not always pleasant, they did provide the lessons needed to be where he is today, as well as found the foundation for where he desires to go in the future. His motto, make a habit of going places not easily reached, and he has definitely done that. I follow him on social media, and he's definitely doing stuff that just makes me breathe hard, just thinking about attempting. So, because he believes that in all aspects of life, the more you give, the better the reward, which is absolutely the truth. So,
Right, it's a great motto.
Yeah, it is, actually. I've actually known Mike for a couple years, and he definitely is positivity and making sure that you look at the bright side of things and making sure that you take action. I know one of your big things is massive action, right?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Because, the path to success, I think, is actually built upon the bodies of those that didn't act. And I hate to say it that way. It's just the way it is, because so many people have such great ideas and then they do absolutely jack squat with them.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people end life with, I wish I would have, or what if I would have. And I'd rather look like a fool than ask myself, what if?
Yeah, absolutely. It's actually, I just did that. I know why you said that, because you just saw my last post, I think probably from yesterday, where I had a could, should, and then those were both crossed out with a will. And, you know, and it was exactly about that. It was literally talking about will is an implicit promise to yourself or others that when you say, I will do something, it creates a whole different aspect of I should or I could. And of course, those ones, you may learn from those when you don't do something, but it's usually a very hard lesson. And it's much better, like you said, to look like a fool and do something than not.
Mm-hmm. Well, if we can just take our ego and set it aside for a moment, we're going to be judged no matter what we do. No matter how great you are at something, you're going to have the naysayers, the negative people. So if you're going to focus all your attention on what people are thinking about you, you're never going to do really great things for yourself because you're too worried about others. So get the ego out of here. It's not worth it. Yeah. I have one. I have a big one. And it's not worth it to put that at the forefront of what I will or won't do.
Right. It does depend on, I mean, if you want to talk about egos, Austin right here.
Yeah,
my God.
I've got a pretty big ego.
But
I feel like I know when to, like what you were saying though, I loved what you were saying. It's like you have a big ego, yet you tuck it away, you put it to the side during certain things. That's important because you can have that confidence and stuff, but like what you're saying, and I think it plays into that whole, like what you're saying, you can have an idea, but it's jack squat unless you actually do anything about it. A lot of people, their ego will validate them and say like, oh, that idea was good enough. I had that idea. I'm so smart. I'm a genius.
Yeah.
But it's like, no, you're not a genius. You just thought of something and you didn't do anything about it.
But what happens though if somebody takes their ego and they actually surround themselves with people who can do? They may not be doing it, but they've given that idea to someone else and have them take it on. I mean, because there is a fine line between confidence and ego. I mean, because without confidence, you wouldn't have an ego. Well, I shouldn't say that because you can't have an ego without confidence.
Ego can be false.
You can.
That's much more of a conceited kind of arrogance more than anything. But
and it's false usually too. And it's the whole catch-22 of, does confidence breed more confidence or does action breed confidence? I don't know still. All I know is that every time I've ever lacked confidence in anything, if I just was willing to step forward into the discomfort of something, I got slapped in the face. I got knocked down a few times, although I learned something from it. And that gave me confidence to come back a little bit stronger. And that's why I still think my favorite book, if not in my top 3 of all time, is Sometimes You Win, Sometimes You Learn. You're going to get knocked down. And as long as you're leaning forward, you'll be okay.
Yeah, it was definitely that aspect of confidence or skill. I got into one of those conversations online about, which comes first, what do you need more? And it was actually for an entrepreneur, and I kind of had to say, well, for an entrepreneur, confidence probably is necessary, but I would more argue that skill, if you have a skill, that you will be able to build on that, which will give you confidence to try other things. And now the argument that everybody was hitting me with was,
I don't think I agree with that.
Was if you have confidence first, then you can learn skill. Like if you have the confidence, but my view is, well, how do you get that confidence? And if you're not raised with a supportive family, if you're not raised in that environment, because without that environment, it's going to be hard pressed to find someone who has confidence. And that was my argument of why. No, I think if someone who was brought up in a non-loving, confident, supportive environment, but they have a skill and they know they have a skill, that's going to give them confidence to get out, whatever the situation.
I think.
is.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, and sometimes the skill is actually just the willingness to go do something that you don't know how to do, which is totally counteractive to what you just said a little bit. Although I think it kind of plays with it.
Yeah.
My one of my greatest skills is to be willing to go do something I don't know how to do.
Yeah.
Which then helps me gain the confidence.
Yep.
And that is a skill, and then you keep learning, and then it breeds the confidence.
So you do. You guys both agree that skill is the basis.
No, because
I like this. All right.
No, and I'm going to disagree because the premise of what you were saying of if somebody has a skill and they know they have a skill, they develop that, they gain confidence. Some people have a skill, know they have a skill, and just no matter what, they won't have that confidence. They won't build. Well, they could build that confidence, but it won't.
Right.
So
but how do they get confidence? See,
it comes from.
So now I know. Tell me if I'm wrong about like what you mentioned, Mike. If you end up coming up with, they take action. If you take action, then that's how you can actually then develop that skill or develop anything into confidence and such.
True. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it's okay. I think that is that's tough because, as you said, Marquez, it's not always ingrained in us. And so we have to find people. So that comes back to the ego thing. If I'm willing to let my ego be put aside and let other people pour into me and say, look, you're being a puss. Let's go run this path together. It's okay. You're going to look like an idiot. You're going to feel like an idiot. You're going to get slapped in the face, and I'm going to be there with you to help you. So you need people to help you develop that if you don't have it, because if you don't, you're going to live a life of regret and what ifs. Oh. And so I do think skill is important. And an acronym is coming to mind that someone shared with me a while back. It's called LIFER: learn, implement, fail, evaluate, repeat. And that's the way it's a cycle. And that, okay, great. Teach me just enough to where I can go take action on it. I'm going to go put action around it, and I'm probably going to suck at it. Think about riding a bike for the first time. Or I'm teaching my kids how to ride bikes right now. It's freaking awful because they're unconfident, they're unskilled, and they are frustrated and crying and worrying. And I'm like, no, I know you can do this. I can see the future for you. I can see it now. They just don't believe it yet. So I've got to stick with them. I've got to stay there, and they're failing left and right. And I'm failing at teaching them. I know that we'll have success because we just got to keep moving forward.
Yeah, just, you know what? I think would help, and this is more of like, if you don't follow him, you won't get this. But if you just put the knee pads over the skin and don't let them wear pants, they will feel so more comfortable about that. If they can just do it pantsless, I guarantee you with your kids, they will probably be like, all right, let's go.
You're absolutely right. Anything pantsless, they are in. They are in.
And how old are they again? They're about 6. Is that about right?
They turn 6 next month. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so 5, 6. So that gives an idea, audience. They're the cutest kids. You see the post. They are so rambunctious. They are literally taking action in everything, and then they conk out hard.
Yeah, they're like lithium-ion batteries. They go. They just stop.
Yep. So how old do they have to be before you'll take them with you on your hikes and the big ones, the mountains ones that you're doing?
You know, so I'll give you an example of how our family works. My wife does say slow down and does say be careful more than I probably like. And every time she says it, I instantly retort with a go faster, lead with your face. I get in trouble for that sometimes. And yes, we have been in the ER a few times for facial laceration. So I probably shouldn't be talking about it. To answer your question though, I'll probably push that envelope. Since the day they were in the womb, before they were even born, I was talking about doing a 3-week cross-country trip where we do mountains. We go to ballparks and stuff like that. And
cool.
So, yeah, when they're 4 years old or 5 years old. And my wife, luckily, she tempers me a little bit. I think you're getting a little ahead of yourself. So to answer your question, I'm probably looking at more like around 8 or 9 years old before I'll take them on big overnighter where we do an actual pretty large section.
And that's perfect because it gives you a couple years to help with getting your wife to kind of agree to it. And it's kind of like with April and I when I'm trying to get her to do a new venture. You know, it's kind of like lay the groundwork, just, you know, months of, I can't do it years because it will end up changing, but, you know, months in advance because she's the one that basically pulls me back, and thankfully so.
Right.
Well, and that's the great news. That's the great thing about having a partner in your life, whether they're a friend, mentor, significant other, spouse, whatever that is that if you complement each other in that way, you know, I'll give you an example. When our boys were 2 years old, just under 2 years old, I think, my wife went out of town for the first time with some girlfriends, my mom and I think my sister actually. And I used that opportunity to go and get them out into public in ways that she wouldn't. They were always in a stroller because, you know, protecting and this, that, and the other. I let them run wild. And I did that to prove a point that they're still alive. Like, come back to her, and then she brings me back on other things. I'm going to go do stuff that's a little bit too crazy right now. She'll say, well, let's think about this part of that. Okay, you're probably right. So balancing each other out that way, they're going to get stretched, they're going to get pushed, and they're also going to stay alive because she helps me keep them alive.
Yeah. No, I always thought like a lot of times when we're doing business stuff and I talk about my business partner and being April, and they say, oh, this is kind of an opposites attract. I'm like, not opposites at all. It's actually the complementary. It's the way we work together. And it brings up another thing about people talk about work-life balance. And I come at them and I say, it's not a balance. It's an integration, because although sometimes you can just shut it off and not have any work, but if you're working for yourself and you are working, especially if you're working with other people and you have responsibility for other people, chances are, even if you're on vacation, you still have to check in with work. You still have to, it's an integration about are you there, and being, like you said, with being present in your mind. You can do that, but just knowing also that it's not one or the other. That's the thing. It's not ever one or the other. At least in my opinion, it's not black or white. It's not one or the other. It's not like, oh, I'm not doing any work right now. Well, maybe for that moment or those moments, but the reality is you've already prepared though that, okay, every couple hours I at least have to set aside 15 minutes to check in to make sure there's no fires or there's nothing that has to be done.
Well, it also really depends on your job. Like what you're doing, what your career is. If you're on a career tracker, if you're just kind of working like to pay bills and stuff like that.
Right, of course. But even then there's an integration because you don't want necessarily, I mean, if you are a 9-to-5er in the weekend and you just shut off, okay. But then you also have to revamp up and get up for Monday. And normally most people don't want to.
Well, that's my Monday. So.
And how common is it really these days that you just work 9 to 5 and check out? There are some industries, there are some jobs out there, although if you are moving up that ladder or whatever you want to call it, it's very, very rare that you can check out completely when the clock clicks.
That's true.
Yeah, it is. And it's one of those that one's another one about integration versus balance. And that's one of the things that I always find that, so when we talk about the positivity and optimism and such, I see a lot of things that they're oversimplified. And although there's a place for that, sometimes I just have a problem with the fact that there's that oversimplification and people miss the point of it, or they don't get a deeper point out of it. And it's one of those things that kind of separates when I talk to other people that are in that same personal development, professional development, because although you guys can't see it, I can already see Mike in this Zoom call grinning, kind of like, no, the simplicity of it is what makes it work for some people, which is true. But it just bugs the heck out of me. And I have this argument with everybody that why can't we expect more? Why can't we, expect hold people to a higher standard?
Well, Mike, first things first. Do you, because he spoke for you, is that your actual sentiment? Do you actually think that simple?
Good point.
What is your actual stance on that?
Yeah, stop talking for me. Come on.
I know.
Man. Right?
That's why I have him. See how horrible this would be if it was just me? I have to have him.
Yeah.
So I actually agree. I do. I think simplifying the actions. There's a law in a class that we've at least heard of or taken. I've taken BOLD, which is Business Objective Life by Design, 13 times now. And it's a 7-week course. And in there, they talk about that. They talk simple, not easy. So the simplification of things, if I want to move forward, these are the simple steps I need to take. Now, where it's not easy is the actual application of that. It's simple to create a plan. It's simple to think about what I want to do. It's simple to come up with an idea. Then the hard part, the less easy part, is the execution of it. And so I agree with you that, it is oversimplification sometimes. You don't just check out at 5 o'clock in most industries, especially working for yourself. Now, what a mentor of mine said to me, though, which really, really two things that struck home with me were, number one, he asked me the question, do you ever feel guilty taking the night off and just spending it with yourself or your family? And I said, yeah, I do. He said, do you ever feel guilty taking the week off or the weekend off and just doing whatever you want? I go, yeah. He says, that's usually because you're not being productive or purposeful enough during the day or during the week. Mm-hmm. Imagine doing all the work you could and being extremely productive. We're not going to ever be 100%. Although if you're being extremely productive during the times where you've dedicated to your business or your job or whatever, you could, without guilt, check out. Doesn't mean you don't have responsibility, right? You could, at least without guilt. Right. And I'll give you an example. This last weekend, I climbed, what was it?
Kilimanjaro?
No. I haven't elevated to those yet. So it's Pyramid Peak. It's the highest peak in the Desolation Wilderness in Northern California. And I had set a goal because I was taking the family to the beach the next day. I set a commitment. I told my team, I told my wife that if I don't set 3 appointments in our business today, because our business needs to grow, it needs to move faster. If I don't set 3 appointments, I'm not going. I'm not going to the beach tomorrow, which increased the accountability because I don't want to let my family down. Mm-hmm. I want to go to the beach and I want to be able to unplug. And I also knew myself that if I didn't have those things accomplished by the time I left for the beach on Sunday morning, I was going to be thinking about it all day.
Right.
Instead, I set them. And on Sunday, I complete 90%. I checked out mentally from work. Yeah. I was there and I was present in the moment and I felt like I had earned it. And that's what I think a lot of people in our society today are missing. They don't feel like they've actually earned the time that they take off.
Yeah, that's very true.
So what would you say to the people, because I agree with what you're saying, right? If you're so productive through all this time that theoretically you should feel not guilty if you're to take time off. But what about for those people that never feel like they did enough? What if they check off everything on their checklist? And that's
coming from given somebody who's wrapping up an album who doesn't seem to be able to wrap it up.
Well, I think there's a lot of people, especially, in my age group of like 22, 23, that feel that way, feel very restless in the sense that like, okay, we could have done everything, but there's always like, we just feel like there's pressure. Like if we ever stop to work, that there's this pressure that we're missing something, even if everything is like checked off.
So the pressure of missing something, I think that's an internal thing. You're going to miss stuff. Mm-hmm. There's going to be messes that you're going to create. I don't think you'll ever get over that. What I think though is you become more comfortable in the fact that, okay, I can do a certain amount within a certain amount of time. And when I've done that, I need to be able to give myself the credit for it. Because what I think we're doing to ourselves, and that sounds specifically like what you're doing to yourself, is it's never good enough. Now, don't get me wrong. Whenever I approach a goal, I'm setting the next one. It doesn't necessarily mean that I don't stop and celebrate the moments. I'm constantly telling the people I get to mentor and coach, I want you to pause and I want you to take stock. And I want you to give yourself a pat on the back once in a while and tell yourself in the mirror that you're good. You did a great job and celebrate that. You just don't stay there.
Right.
If you celebrate for 5 minutes or if you take a weekend off or a night off to do something for yourself, great. Set that up in advance so where you earn it. And then when you've earned it, give yourself credit and allow yourself to enjoy it.
Yeah, right. Absolutely. I think that's hugely important is the acknowledgement of the self, right? Like and I think that's what most people, like what I was talking about, myself or people in my age group, they don't do that. So they never feel like it's over because there was never closure. It's like, good job. And so, I think that's what you just said. I think it's totally
there's
right.
always that pressure on there because I've always talked about and telling you guys always is getting your mind right and whatever that means. Because sometimes if your mind's not right and you go into something, you might as well be there. Right. Like when you're managing or leading people, sometimes it's okay where I've told people to be like stuff was going on in their life and I was like, go home, go take care of it. It's not whatever you're gonna miss here at work and stuff. It's not gonna. It'll hold because. And that approach has so many benefits from the concept of actually caring about the people in your charge, the empathy factor, and yet you'll still get that pushback from a traditionalist saying, "What? You lost that productivity?" I'm like, I didn't lose anything because that productivity was gonna suck.
Right. No, so if anything, you just gained it or gained more for the future. Oh,
down goes the logo. So, but yeah,
and then they fell.
For those of you who obviously aren't watching, we had a logo on the wall and it just came crashing down. I don't know if that's like ominous or what, but
it's always a good sign. Always.
We're bringing the house down.
Oh, we're
doing so good. We're just that's what it is.
But yeah, keeping your mind right, and I've told you guys that just because and part of that was that wraps it up or that ties it in is that understand that if you are constantly thinking that you haven't done enough or that you have to do something else, your mind is spinning. and it's not necessarily going to engage like it needs to for your next thing. So you got to make sure that whether that's pat on the back, whether that's take that weekend off, or just the fact that, hey, this is accomplished. I'm a big check off person, to-dos and check them off, finish them. And that's kind of an immediate kind of feedback that, okay, I accomplished that one thing. There's still more to do, but at least I can put that one aside and move on.
Right.
You know, there's that fine line you got to walk too, that there's times where you need to push through and there's times where you do need to take a break. I've gone into funks in my life where there was one in 2015. I remember distinctly. It was like 6 weeks where I felt like a zombie. And it was because I had been working, I think it was 14 months straight, 7 days a week at that point. And business was great. Business was growing. I had new twin boys that were only 6 months old. I was working a lot. I was spending a lot of time with family too. And what I realized though, in that moment was, I needed to push through because I couldn't let up. I couldn't let up because my family depended on it. And I also needed to find some sort of counterbalance.
Right.
And what I realized in that time frame was that I was losing myself. And here's why. I love my family, and I would go through that entire phase again for them. And yet everything in my world that 14 months was about growing a business and about making sure my wife and 2 sons were taken care of. Nothing for me. Now that does fuel me. Feeding, helping them grow and all that helps fuels me. Although I wasn't exercising, I wasn't reading, I wasn't listening to podcasts, I wasn't doing anything for myself, hobbies, nothing. And I was losing myself in the process. And what Marquez, what you said there was powerful just a moment ago. Was, well, if I lose myself, if I don't have myself, if I don't have some joy or some fulfillment here, I can't pour into others. I'm losing that productivity anyways. So I got to find a way to get it back.
Well, and a lot of people talk about that concept of you can't give what you don't have.
Yep.
I've been reading, it's funny because there's the guy, I don't know whether or not you're familiar with him. He's beyond both of us, Leo Buscaglia. And I was raised by my mom had a big influence and stuff. And I'm rereading some of his books. And that big part, one of his big things, he's basically, for anybody who doesn't know who he was known in the late 70s and 80s, well, the 70s and early 80s as the love teacher. He literally taught at USC a class about love. Go figure. You should read the books if you haven't. It's very, very interesting. Something that actually right at this time and age, definitely could learn from him. But he was talking about, and other people have kind of caught onto it, that you can't give what you don't have. So if you're not loving yourself, if you're not full in yourself, how can you give that to anybody else? You can't give like an empty present, so to speak. And you're right. If you lose yourself and that's a huge part of where I do with my Think, Care, Live More. It's awareness, kindness, and action. And that awareness is self-awareness, it's situational awareness, and it's about understanding sometimes the best thing you can do is just be, not to overthink something, even though it's the part of the think more. And a lot of people forget that. It's okay. We had a whole episode about, self-care and all that kind of stuff, and is it overrated? And for I pretty much took the stance that, I think for the most part it is. But
he was wrong.
Of course. But I was talking about the overdoing of it, so to speak, not the little stuff. But
and in which case that is correct.
Yeah. See.
Sure. And if you look at our society, it is I always envision a pendulum, and the pendulum swings so far to one side or the other in everything, politics, social, everything. It's like, oh no, we got to go over here now. We got to stay over here. We got to tack this thing to the wall on the left side. Oh, now we got to go back over here onto the right side. And it's like, can we just find a way to make it move faster back and forth in the middle?
Yep.
We don't.
Yeah,
that's
totally.
Counterbalance.
How dare you bring up the word moderate? Oh my God!
It's a bad word.
Heaven forbid.
I can't believe it took us this long for pendulum to be introduced.
Pendulum.
Because we use that phrase all the time, and we've never once said it on the podcast, as far as I know.
Yeah, we talk about it, but it's those
which
extremes.
Which is so funny. So like, he stole it.
But it is true about that we every aspect. That's why they talk about the one thing is anything in extreme is bad.
Yeah.
Except for when you're telling the extreme of that's bad.
Yes.
It's kind of like there's always an exception to every rule kind of thing. But ultimately, for more or less, it's like anything in extreme is bad. Although I would take my chances with chocolate chip ice cream and chocolate chip cookie dough, but
you would have an amazing 3-month long life.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So yeah.
I want to bring it back a little bit. You said that thing about you can't give what you don't have.
More or less, it's the idea being that it's hard if you don't. For example, the one that everybody uses is that if you don't love yourself, then how can you love someone else?
Right. Okay.
That's similar. That's the idea.
What are your thoughts on that, Mike? Do you agree? Do you disagree?
Oh, I completely. Well, let's define that. I cannot pour into others if I myself am empty. It's the whole analogy of the cup.
Right.
You cannot pour into someone else's cup if your cup is
Exactly.
empty. And
That's
so
the most recent version of it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and the hardest part is that the feeling of selfishness around that. You know, people feel like I got to give. You're absolutely right. Giving is how you're going to receive, I think, more than you could ever ask for. And at the same time, you've got to have a trove to give from. And the only way I know how to say it is to find out what your own ways of refilling that trove are. It's kind of similar to the emotional bank account of Stephen Covey and the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Yeah. If you're constantly pouring into the bank account with someone else, you're going to make a withdrawal because you're going to screw up. I think you need to do the same thing for yourself. So I identified a few things in my life that when I start to feel like I'm going into overdraft in my own trove, if you will, my own bank account, I have to replenish them. And that exercise, that's me time, that is reading and listening, those things that allow me to be just me and learn and grow. And then that way, when I'm doing that, every time if I go for a walk in the morning, I go for a hike on the weekend, and I'm listening to a book on audio, every time I come out feeling energized, every time I come out feeling like I have something new or great or supplementary to something I've already shared with people. And that brings extra fuel to me, which then I can pour back into others. So the answer to your question in short is yes, I absolutely believe you have to pour into yourself.
Well, go ahead.
Because
he's setting you up.
No, I'm not setting you up. I'm actually setting up the whole. I agree with that concept. Everything you just said, I agree. The one that I've always had a particular beef with that I don't agree with is the one about love specifically. Like, I agree, you can't give to other people if you don't have energy and all that stuff. Like, if you don't have, like what you were saying with your own trove, I totally agree with that. But the one about love, I think, and I think that saying was true at one point.
I think there might be something that you might missing though, is that you can't. Maybe it should be modified. We do this a lot, where we end up coming up with a phrase and then we modify it. So it might be you can't love someone to the most, like to the extreme. Basically, you can't love somebody well if you don't necessarily love yourself.
All right,
so is that a little better?
No, because this is why I think that. All right, because there's two perspectives in this, right? There's whatever you think you're giving versus, or three actually, whatever you think you're giving, what you're actually giving, and then what that other and then what that other person thinks you're giving.
Yeah.
So if you could be giving something that's not genuine. You might think it's genuine, but it's not.
Okay.
That other person perceives it as genuine.
Okay.
So they're receiving true love.
Well, no, they're not.
So you might not actually have that to give.
They're not actually,
but they're getting that.
They're not actually receiving that. They think they are, though. They're not.
Yeah, but
they're gonna find out, and we'll get Mike back in here. They're gonna find out at some point when they meet someone else, and they get what they think is true love.
What if they never do? That's a whole lot of assumption. I'm just saying to that person in that moment, they feel like what they're getting is true love.
I get what you're saying. I totally get what you're saying, that they feel it. So that comes back to what is perception. That comes back to perspective is reality. If they think they're getting true love and they're getting the crap beat out of them, but they think that's true love, I'm pretty sure that's a problem.
I know that's kind of a weird thing and it's slightly controversial or whatever. People might not agree with it. But just just logically, like that trying to
So what he's saying. So Mike, do you agree with the fact that you can get away, especially with quote unquote stereotypical men in their 20s and teens and stuff? They can get away with saying that they love someone, not really love them, but as long as they deliver the communication well and the person receiving it thinks they're serious, then it's okay.
That's not just 20s. That's dating in general.
That's everybody.
Right. Yeah. And I think 100% to answer your question, yes, they can and will get away with it.
This is what they have to deal with.
Should they do it? Absolutely not. But some people aren't aware that they're doing it. That's one
So
thing.
Tying it back in then, so how what would you say then? You're right about if to his point about you don't necessarily have to be genuine in what you give as long as the other person feels that you are. Because that could be a motivational tactic. If the other person, if you only have to give 70% to that person, but they feel like they're getting your 100%, is that okay? How do you feel? How do you feel about yourself? Giving 70% when they think you're giving 100.
Okay, well,
I don't feel good about that. I can only speak for myself. So I've got just a year ago or so, I went to a mentor of mine and said, I just don't feel like I'm making an impact. There's good things happening for these people. I just don't feel like I'm giving everything I could. And I was really frustrated about it for about 30 days. So personally speaking, no, I will not accept not giving my full into something. Now, I don't give my full all the time, and I usually regret that, or I usually look back on that. Now, on the other side of the coin, though, as the person receiving, I can tell you that I don't care if they're being genuine or not. If I take it and I can use it for something that's going to benefit.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, and it is the flip side. I guess it becomes a personal choice. Again, one of the themes, personal responsibility of, hey, if you're okay with giving 70% because that person feels that they're getting the 100, that may be okay, because the argument can be made that now I have more time to reach someone else. I can use that extra space and try to reach someone else.
Yeah, but that's not what I was saying, though, right? That's not the same thing, because that's a choice. What you're describing is a choice to give somebody 70%. What I was saying, which, I mean, that would fall into it, but what I was saying was somebody thinks that they're giving you their 100%. They might not be, because that whole thing about the love is like, oh, you can't give love if you don't love yourself.
So I guess
most people think they love themselves until they're confronted with something that shows that they don't.
Right, and I get what you're saying. I guess what I took from what you said was that, hey, I think I love myself. I'm giving what I think is 100%, but I'm not really. But I don't know.
Right, but that's the way you're describing it is that you're consciously giving somebody 70%. You're aware of the fact that you're not giving your all.
Okay.
There's a huge difference.
Are you following this, Mike?
Yeah, I think so. I think that goes back to, okay, how I show up. Okay, what am I okay with character-wise, integrity-wise, as far as how I show up for others? And that may be, for some people, 70 might be okay, 50% might be okay. Being a full-on liar might be okay for some. Great, that's their choice. I may not respect it. It's their choice, though.
Right.
On the receiving side, though, I don't like to say ignorance is bliss. I don't like ignorance. And at the same time, if I can take something from a conversation, if I can take something from someone pouring something into me, even if they on their side were just throwing a flippant remark out and it struck me in such a way to where it got me going, got me fueled up, I'm cool with it. I'm cool with it. Now, in my personal relationships, maybe that's a little different. I'd rather know all.
Yeah.
If I can draw, though, from somebody else that doesn't really care or just threw it out there randomly, I'm okay with that, too.
Yeah. So I do understand what you're saying about it. It's
because I totally agree. I don't want to give just 70% to somebody. Right. Like 100%. Like,
I think the basics were that so it does come down to that perception of yourself. If you feel like if you don't know yourself, I guess that's the realization. If you have the awareness that, hey, I'm aware that I'm actually not fully in love with myself or understand myself and stuff. If you're conscious of that, then you probably won't be able to give that. Mm-hmm. However, if you're not conscious of that and you do feel that way, you do feel like you're giving what you're giving it, and the other person, of course, is probably receiving it thinking that you're giving it too. So
then I think the burden of it also, though, really falls on the person you're giving it to, because that person, again, they have all the control over how much love they think they're actually getting. Because the flip is true, you could be giving 100% and they might not think you are.
And what about this? Yep. This is the other part of it. What if, can you receive love 100% if you don't love yourself? Can you receive love in its truest form if you don't love yourself?
Not for me.
Same. Yeah.
Not for me personally.
It's hard because you have so many walls. You probably put up so many barriers, internal struggles. I think that's a big basis for a lot of relationships and how we talked about on the last one about shared trauma doesn't mean shared experience in the sense of that, just because you guys, two people went through something, one may have healed, one may have dealt with it, the other one hadn't. You can't just assume that that's going to be a good match because they went through the same trauma. That ties in with, if you haven't healed yourself, how are you going to accept something from someone else? So
I look at it, the nuclear examples are the two that always come to mind for me whenever we talk about this topic is, number one, someone that's going through bouts of depression. Everybody around them sees that there's light, that see that there's great opportunity, there's great potential, that this person's an amazing person, yet they cannot hear any of it.
Yeah.
It's just there's a wall there, there's a block there, they just can't. Or the other one is someone in an abusive relationship.
Right.
They've got friends telling them they got to get out, and they just can't do it because this is what they're used to. And then when they do finally get out of it, it's really hard for them to receive the love from the next person because this is not what love feels like, because this was what I thought, this is what I experienced. And so I think it's really difficult to receive unless you're truly aware of who you are and what you need out of it.
Yeah, absolutely, because it does take that, and it does come to that personal responsibility of what you're willing to do. You know, like you said in that, like for the abusive relationship, you know, a lot of times I've learned for social media, because unfortunately I'm on there way more than I should be. But the idea of that, I'm not on there to argue with people, and I'm not on there actually to change minds. I've learned. I saw one post where someone said, "I'm just there actually, literally, to provide a different perspective." And that's hard for me because I like to win. I want to win an argument. I want to change a mind. And you're just not going to do that on social media. But however, I've learned that I can now throw something out there to try to, with whether it needs backing up or whether it's just a good opinion or whatever the case is, but throw it out there, start the conversation, and then let it be. I don't. I mean, I can argue with. I mean, someone can come at me and stuff, and I'll just be like, "Hey, thanks for the talk," and then just walk away. And it's hard. But I have no idea, though, whether or not that spark or that perspective somewhere down the line will take hold. Or if someone else says something, and then it builds, and it builds, and it builds. And then eventually, you know, that's how a mind will be changed. That's how it can be actually, where they've looked and went, maybe they'll look back and go, well, you know what? Marquez did say that before, and he's had other things that he was right, other things that he was wrong. But this one, and then it makes sense, and it kind of works. But sometimes that's all you can do. You can just plant that seed. And you know, go from there. Yep. So I do have a question for you. How did you get Putty? I never actually. I don't know.
Frankly, I don't either. And in high school, I had a buddy that called me that, amongst other nicknames I had. You know, Putnam. So that's my last name.
Right.
Kind of. It came back in around 2013 or so. It came back from a guy I know in Portland, Oregon, and it just stuck. And then it spread. And I'd say realistically, 90% of the people that know me don't call me by anything other than Putty now.
Yeah.
Wow. I think it's even in my email, like it says Michael Putty Putnam. I don't even know how that got there. It just showed up. So
well, I question it. Because it's literally kind of like, I kind of was like questioning when I'm saying my because I'm so used to Putty.
Yeah.
So, well,
people say Michael. I'm like, who's that?
Yeah.
Oh, me. Okay, got it.
You're talking about me. Okay, yeah, okay. So, well, thanks for coming on.
Pleasure.
As you could tell, that's why I said this conversation was going to go wherever it goes. So, but yeah, I appreciate it. This is going to be good. I really do.
You.
Your insights and stuff. That's kind of why I wanted to reach out, because I knew you'd be able to contribute and give our listeners another perspective of what to expect and such. So.
Yeah, definitely. That was very pleasant.
Yep.
That was one of the most pleasant episodes I think we've done. I loved that one.
And you can tell with him, it's difficult because, like I said, you can see how we go back and forth, and that's why that's kind of why I think people enjoy this. So we want to bring on people that actually add to that, and you did. So that was great.
Yeah.
So
you're like the third person. We might just invite you all the time.
Yeah.
You know?
Happy to be here. Happy to be here. I will leave you with one thing that just kind of goes back in with the. Giving to yourself and finding time for yourself. My mentor said to me a long time ago, there's a difference between having something take attention from you and giving attention to something. And what he meant was being present in the moment. So tune out devices, turn off the alerts and everything when you want to be fully present in the life of yourself or someone else, and just be there. Be present, because the world will keep spinning even if you're not focused. So.
Yep.
That's great.
So with that, I'm going to wrap it up with think more, care more, live more, and remember, you can change your life. We can change the world one decision at a time. Thanks, everybody.